Soulcaster.
Leo was wearing his favorite socks the day she came back, the ones with the little red foxes. Evelyn remembers this because she was crouched on the living room rug, organizing photo albums for his 17th birthday, and one of the socks peeked out from under the table as he sat cross-legged, silently flipping through a programming magazine, mouthing the code lines under his breath. He didn't speak much when he was deep in concentration, and Evelyn had learned to take these silences as sacred. Interrupting Leo mid-focus was like walking in on someone's prayer. The sun was kind that morning, spilling through the window, warming her hands as she turned the pages. And then she saw it. That photo. Leo, barely 3, wearing a yellow sweater he hated, clutching a green plastic truck. Melissa, her daughter, was kneeling beside him, one hand on his shoulder like she wasn't sure if she should be in the frame. Her smile was thin. Her eyes weren't looking at Leo. They were looking past him. At the door. Evelyn froze. That was the weekend Melissa had disappeared. The doorbell rang. She thought nothing of it, expecting it to be another delivery. The cake, maybe, or the books she ordered for Leo's birthday. Instead, when she opened the door, it felt like swallowing glass. Melissa stood there in tailored linen, with a blowout and lips like frozen fruit. Her smile was just slightly too late, like it had to be queued up. Next to her was a man in a charcoal suit, clean-shaven, holding a slim leather briefcase. "Mrs. Holloway?" he asked, as if they hadn't met when Leo was born. As if she hadn't once hosted his wedding shower, years ago, when Melissa still had friends. "My name is Daniel Voss. I'm representing your daughter. We'd like to discuss Leo's future." Evelyn couldn't stop staring at Melissa's shoes. Expensive. Beige. Not the kind of shoes you wear when you've come to beg for forgiveness. But they were spotless. Everything about her was. Her nails were done, her skin gleamed. She smelled like bergamot and indifference. Leo hadn't moved from the couch. "I'm sorry," Evelyn finally said, too calmly. "You're going to need to be more specific." "We'd rather do this inside," Melissa said. Her voice had the same detached coolness Evelyn remembered from the fight they had the day she left. The one where Melissa said, "I feel like I'm drowning in motherhood. You want him more than I do." They came in. Leo didn't look up. "We've been made aware," Daniel began, unfolding a document on the dining table, "of a recent opportunity involving your grandson's software development. I believe it was mentioned in Tech Now Weekly." Evelyn blinked. "He's 72. "Exactly," Melissa said, folding her arms. "And as his mother, I have legal rights." "No," Evelyn cut in. "You had rights. And then you left a voicemail and vanished for 10 years. Melissa's expression didn't flicker. "I've been in recovery." Evelyn almost laughed. "Recovery from what? Responsibility?" There was a pause. "We understand this is emotional," Daniel inserted smoothly, like a dull blade. "But we're here to ensure Leo's transition into adulthood is handled appropriately, especially given the value of his intellectual property." There it was. The real reason. Not love, not guilt, not a sudden maternal awakening. But property. She wanted what Leo built. If you're still reading, I'll say this once, because more than 99% of you read or listen without subscribing. If this story pulls something inside you, consider subscribing. It's the best way to keep these stories going and the team behind them doing their best. Evelyn sat down, her hands folded so tightly her knuckles ached. Leo was still on the couch, still reading, but his left eyebrow had shifted up. He was listening, tracking. Melissa glanced toward him like a predator trying to assess a new species. "We'd like to set up a plan," the lawyer said, sliding the paper forward. "Something that ensures Leo's success doesn't come at the cost of his care, that he's supported appropriately." "Supported?" Evelyn echoed, with a thin smile. "That's a word I'd love to see on your bank statements for the last decade." Daniel continued. "This isn't a threat. We're here in good faith." "Forgive me," Evelyn said, rising from her seat, "but I find it difficult to believe people who arrive in silk and scent, waving paperwork after 10 years of nothing. Not a card, not a call, not a box of cereal." Melissa's mouth twitched. "I've changed." Evelyn turned toward Leo. "What do you think?" Leo looked up, finally. His eyes were so steady it startled her. "Can they come back tomorrow?" he asked. "I'm optimizing the interface." Melissa blinked. "You're what?" "The thing you'll hear about," Leo said, finally setting his magazine down. "It's not done, and you're interrupting." He wasn't rude. He was clinical. Evelyn saw something pass behind Melissa's eyes, an almost imperceptible flicker. Maybe recognition, maybe fear. "We'll be in touch," Daniel said. "Oh, I'm counting on it," Evelyn replied. She closed the door behind them and leaned against it, her heart pounding like it hadn't in years. Not since that voicemail. The one where Melissa said, "Don't try to find me. I need air." Well, now she wanted oxygen in the form of a few million. And Evelyn wasn't sure what scared her more, that Melissa had come back with a lawyer, or that Leo hadn't seemed surprised. Not even a little. It was 2:13 a.m. when the voicemail came in. Evelyn had already been awake. Leo, barely 3 then, was going through what she would later understand was sensory overload, crying in sharp bursts, curling into the corners of rooms, banging his head gently against couch cushions. She'd been sitting beside him in the hallway, softly tapping the floor to the rhythm of his breathing, trying to coax him back into the rhythm of rest. Her daughter's voice, hollow and mechanical, broke through the silence with that single gutting line. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm not built for motherhood. I tried. I can't do this. Don't call me." There was no crying, no goodbye, just a quiet click. By the time the sun rose, Melissa's clothes were gone, her drawer empty. Toothbrush snapped clean off the counter like she'd never brushed her teeth in that house. Evelyn didn't fall apart. She didn't have the luxury. Leo had been sitting at the kitchen table, spooning applesauce into his socks, murmuring to himself, utterly unaware that his entire maternal infrastructure had just caved in. The next day, Evelyn called the tutoring centre where she worked part-time and resigned. There was no dramatic speech, just, "My grandson needs me, full-time." She thought it would be 6 months, a year, maybe. Surely Melissa would call. Surely a switch would flip. But time passed like wet cement, slowly sealing her in. So she built the world Melissa abandoned. She learned about sensory processing disorders, about echolalia, about occupational therapy and visual schedules, and the difference between a meltdown and a tantrum. She learned that eye contact could feel like violence, that hugs could overwhelm, that silence wasn't emptiness, it was Leo protecting himself from too much. She stopped trying to pull him into her world, and instead stepped into his. The house transformed, labels on drawers, color-coded calendars, weighted blankets, quiet corners, smooth, silent routines that kept them both sane. Evelyn gave up wine and book clubs and dating entirely. She gave up having anything with buttons on it because Leo hated the sound. She gave up a bank account with more than 2 digits for most of those years. She also gave up waiting for her daughter to come home. And in exchange, she got Leo. He was 17 now, and strange in the most beautiful way. He spoke in clipped, precise phrases when he wanted to. Other times, he typed out responses on his phone with fingers that moved like little bursts of lightning. He didn't do parties, didn't care for sugar, but he loved machines with the quiet ferocity of someone who trusted code more than people. That day, after Melissa's visit, Evelyn stood in the doorway of his room, watching him work. His desk was a meticulous war zone: wires, monitors, tools she didn't recognize, but somehow all in their place. Leo sat with a laptop balanced on a stand, typing fast, back straight, jaw locked. "Need tea?" she asked softly. "No, thank you." His eyes didn't leave the screen. "What are you working on?" He paused, blinked, then said, "A translator." "For what language?" "Not a language. A pattern." He turned slightly. "For people like me." Evelyn walked in slowly, settling into the armchair she kept beside his desk, the one he let her sit in, the only place she didn't rearrange. "I thought your other thing was finished," she said. "That was for experts. This is for teenagers. They don't listen to experts." A tiny smile tugged at the edge of his mouth. She didn't fully understand what he meant, but she nodded like she did. It was a habit now. Trust first, decode later. "Is this part of the thing Melissa was talking about?" she asked, gently. Leo's expression didn't change. "She didn't even ask me about it." Evelyn stared at her hands. They looked older lately, tired in a way hand cream couldn't fix. "She said she's in recovery." Leo blinked. "Recovery isn't the same as repair." Then he returned to typing. That night, Evelyn sat on the porch alone, sipping chamomile tea and watching the dusk roll in over the neighborhood. She could hear Leo inside, the soft click of keys like a second heartbeat. He was building something. Again. But this one felt different. He'd explained it, once as best he could. Something about converting non-linear communication into accessible prompts. She had no clue what that meant in tech terms, but in her gut, she understood what it meant emotionally. A bridge between kids like Leo and a world that never learned to meet them halfway. And now, that bridge was valuable. Financially, publicly, dangerously. Melissa had sniffed it out, and Evelyn was terrified. Not of losing the money. They could live off beans and borrowed grace if they had to. But of losing him. She'd built this world for Leo, one deliberate piece at a time. But could it withstand a lawsuit? A custody hearing? A mother suddenly rebranded? She didn't know. What she did know was that Leo didn't seem scared. He seemed focused, and that somehow scared her more. Leo didn't present things. He unveiled them, piece by precise piece, like someone unspooling a tightly knotted thread. You had to earn the full picture. It was a Thursday, the sky outside an indifferent grey, when he asked Evelyn to sit at the kitchen table and bring your glasses and a quiet mind. That was his way of saying he needed her focused. She obeyed, mostly out of curiosity, partly out of habit. He opened his laptop and tapped twice. The screen displayed a white interface. No frills, no sound. Just a pulsing icon in the center that looked like a thought bubble being quietly punctured. "What am I looking at?" she asked. Leo tilted the screen toward her. "Speak into it." "What should I say?" "Something complicated. Something you don't usually say out loud." She hesitated, then muttered, "Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing taking you in." The app thought for a moment. Then it responded in plain blue text across the screen. "Sometimes I carry too much. I hope it's enough." Evelyn felt her breath catch. Leo explained with typical brevity that the app mapped sentence structures, tone variants, and facial microexpressions when the camera was on to simplify internal processing. It wasn't about dictation, it was about distillation, truth over detail. "I built it for people like me, who feel more than we can shape into words," he said. Evelyn blinked twice. "Does it work for everyone?" "No, just for those who need it." He'd already tested it, quietly. A beta version was being used in a private group of teens from an online neurodivergent forum. "Feedback's clean," he said. "They don't hate it. Some even smile." That alone would have been enough. But things rarely stayed small in Leo's world for long. A week later, a junior editor from a mid-level tech blog stumbled on a forum thread praising a minimalist communication bridge designed by a teenage autistic coder. The article was brief but reverent. Leo didn't even mention it until Evelyn noticed the uptick in emails. Then came the calls. A neurologist from San Diego who worked with nonverbal adolescents offered private funding. A mentor at a tech incubator in Palo Alto wanted to fly Leo out for a residency. A non-profit requested a licensing model. And then, an acquisition offer from a private behavioral tech firm, $3.2 million, plus back-end royalties. Evelyn read the email 4 times, mouth dry. "They want to buy it? Like, buy it? Buy it?" Leo shrugged. "They want control. That's the price they think it takes." He hadn't answered them yet. "I'm thinking," he said simply. "It's not finished." Evelyn stared at her grandson, his calm defiance unnerving. He was 17. He still couldn't stomach the smell of vinegar or the feeling of denim. But he'd built something priceless from silence. And now the noise had found them. She noticed Melissa's name again on her caller ID a day later. She didn't pick up. Then the emails came. "I've been reading about Leo. I'd like to reconnect. He's always been brilliant. I'm so proud of what he's doing. I hope we can talk soon. Mother to mother." "Do you think Leo would be open to a conversation? I've healed so much. I want to make up for lost time." Evelyn forwarded each one to a folder labeled Complications. She didn't respond. Leo didn't mention them, until the letter came. Melissa had retained the same family lawyer who'd stood in Evelyn's hallway. The letter was riddled with careful wording: well-being, support, future development. It was framed as concern, but Evelyn could read through lacquered bullshit better than most. They wanted in. They wanted control. The app had made Leo visible. Too visible. Evelyn sat in the garden that evening, watching the wind rattle the bird feeder, thinking how strange it was. Melissa never cared about Leo's obsessions before. Not the phases, not the endless hours spent with robot kits or sorting bottle caps by texture. But now that his difference translated into dollars, she was rediscovering her maternal instincts. She heard the sliding glass door open behind her. Leo stepped out, hoodie zipped halfway, barefoot on the brick. "They reached out again," he said flatly. "I know." "They want to schedule a call." Evelyn looked up at him. "What do you want?" Leo didn't answer immediately, his gaze fixed on the blackbirds pecking the lawn. Then, "I don't want to explain myself to people who call my work a windfall." Silence. "She didn't come back for me," he added. She came back for what I built. Evelyn nodded, throat thick. That doesn't mean you have to face her alone. Leo didn't respond, just stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked back inside. She noticed the edge of his sleeve was fraying. She would mend it later quietly, one stitch at a time, the way she'd always done. The envelope was thick, cream-coloured, the kind of paper that signalled bad news dressed up in class. It arrived mid-morning, tucked among the usual mix of grocery circulars and property tax reminders, but Evelyn knew it didn't belong with anything mundane. She held it like it might leak. "Leo," she called gently from the kitchen, but got no answer. He was in what he called a compression day, curtains drawn, noise-cancelling headphones on, fingers dancing quietly across his keyboard. Some part of her envied his detachment. She hadn't had the luxury of detaching since the day her daughter walked out and left her holding a confused, wailing toddler who didn't understand where the soft voice and strawberry shampoo smell had gone. She slit the envelope open with a butter knife. The letterhead was embossed, Voss, Linda and Greenwell, attorneys at law. Her stomach turned. She didn't make it past the first sentence before she had to sit down. This letter serves as formal notification of Ms. Melissa Holloway's intent to pursue retroactive custody and partial guardianship of Leo Holloway, a minor, on the grounds of maternal precedence, biological primacy, and the respondent's lack of preparedness for managing Leo's long-term educational, financial, and professional development. Maternal precedence. Biological primacy. The words stung like antiseptic on a burn. Sterile, cold, smug. And that line, lack of preparedness, she almost laughed. Evelyn had learned to predict Leo's migraines by how he tapped his fingers. She'd developed entire meal systems based on the textures he tolerated. She'd fought school boards to get him individualized plans, refused to medicate him into compliance, and taught him how to advocate for himself without a tantrum. But because she didn't own a consulting firm or drive a Tesla, she was unprepared. Her hands shook, not in grief, in rage. She drove to the office of Ruth Franklin, a local family attorney who used to teach law at the community college. Ruth had crow's feet and a pit bull's demeanor. She read the letter in silence, glasses sliding down her nose, then looked at Evelyn like a doctor about to deliver a hard diagnosis. "She's not bluffing," Ruth said, voice low. "And depending on the judge, she could pull this off." "She left him," Evelyn snapped. "For 10 years. She didn't even ask what grade he was in. She missed his diagnosis, his first full sentence, the first time he brushed his own teeth. He didn't speak for almost a year after she left. And now, what? She gets to just show up and take him back like a package on hold." Ruth sighed. "Normally I'd say no, but with Leo under 18, and with the amount of money on the table, things get murky. Courts don't like the idea of a minor managing millions, and Melissa's spinning this as concern for his future." Evelyn pressed the heels of her hands into her eyes. "So, what do I do?" "You fight," Ruth said simply. "But it's going to be expensive. And ugly." When Evelyn got home, Leo was on the porch, barefoot, sipping a protein shake like it was whiskey. He looked up as she parked, but said nothing. She joined him on the steps, the letter still clutched in her purse like a grenade with the pin half pulled. "They want to take you," she said, "to say I'm not fit." Leo didn't flinch. He just took another sip, then asked, "Is that what the letter said? Or what you felt reading it?" Evelyn exhaled. "Both." He nodded. "Do you want me to panic now?" She almost laughed. "Only if you feel like it." "I don't." He handed her the protein shake. "Too much sugar. I can't finish it. She took it, sipped, grimaced. You're right. It's awful. They sat in silence for a long while. Wind rustled the hedges. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked at nothing. Then Leo said, "They think because I don't yell, I don't understand force." Evelyn looked at him. "I know what this is," he said. She didn't come back to mother. She came back to manage. The way he said manage, with clinical detachment, it chilled her, like he'd already gamed out the entire legal scenario and come out the other side, unscathed. "You're still a minor," Evelyn said, too quickly. "That matters in court." "Then I won't be." "What?" "I've been researching emancipation," Leo said, like he was announcing a lunch preference. "I'm compiling documentation." Evelyn stared at him. "Leo, that's huge. That's not just a form you fill out." "I know." "And you're sure?" He turned to look at her then, really look at her. His eyes, which had always darted and danced, settled. "She doesn't see me. She sees a check. You see me. That's the difference. And it's why I need to do this now." Evelyn felt something inside her start to crack, not out of pain, but out of awe. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't planning to run. He was planning to stand. But the fear was still there, a quiet monster curling under her ribs. Because even if Leo saw the truth, the court might not. Melissa had resources, PR spin, a lawyer with perfect posture. All Evelyn had was memory, grit, and a checking account that couldn't take too many more surprises. She had built this boy, but someone else might still get to own the man. Evelyn was refilling the hummingbird feeder when her neighbor Janelle called over the fence with a look that usually preceded either gossip or bad casserole. "Evelyn, honey, have you seen the Gazette?" Evelyn hadn't. She rarely read the Gazette anymore. It had gotten too glossy and suburban cheerful, the kind of paper that ran 3 recipes for cucumber water, but didn't mention the local library losing funding. She wiped her hands on her gardening apron, took the offered copy, and froze when she saw the headline. "A Mother's Second Chance, the Woman Behind the Boy Genius." There was Melissa on the cover. Hair swept to one side, light makeup, soft focus lighting that gave her skin a falsely angelic sheen. She looked 10 years younger, pensive, relatable. Evelyn felt the beginnings of a migraine chew at the back of her skull. She didn't need to read the full interview to know the tone. The headline was a tell. She flipped through, scanning for red flags and bile. They weren't hard to find. Melissa had told the reporter that leaving Leo had been the hardest thing I've ever done, that she suffered undiagnosed postpartum depression, and that she spent the last 10 years in therapy, healing, growing, preparing. The journalist called her courageous, described Leo as the brilliant, neurodivergent teen who defied the odds thanks to his mother's genes and resilience. Evelyn was mentioned once. Raised by his maternal grandmother, Evelyn Holloway, a retired teacher. While well-meaning, some sources close to the family say her control over Leo's life has been intense, bordering on isolating. There were no sources, just spin. The story ran online the next day. Then it was picked up by 2 parenting blogs and a mental health podcast that ran a segment on reunification and redemptive motherhood. Evelyn didn't even know what the hell that meant, but she could feel the narrative congealing like cold grease around her reputation. The comments weren't subtle. Good for her. So many mums are judged unfairly for walking away when they're mentally unwell. That poor kid, being raised by an old woman with control issues. No wonder he's weird. You can't just gatekeep your grandchild's success. He deserves both parents. Gatekeep. Evelyn wanted to throw her phone across the kitchen. Instead, she set it down, slowly, and made herself a cup of coffee she didn't drink. Upstairs, she could hear the rhythmic clack of Leo's keyboard. He hadn't spoken much since the article dropped. Just longer hours coding, less eating, less sleeping. His usual balance of quiet had shifted into something harder, sharper. She knocked gently and opened the door. Leo was sitting on the floor, laptop balanced on a low table he'd modified to sit exactly at elbow height. His room was dim, just one lamp and the glow of his screen. She noticed he'd taken down the few posters he had. A minimalist schematic of a neural net, a sketch of a ship from the Expanse, an old event badge from a tech symposium they'd gone to last fall. "Dinner?" she offered quietly. "Later." She didn't move, just watched him for a moment. His fingers paused. "She's lying," he said suddenly. "But she's loud." Evelyn swallowed. "Yes." He looked up at the ceiling. "That's dangerous." He said it the way someone might describe a loose wire in the wall. Not emotional, just a fact. "You don't have to read the comments, you know," she said. "I'm not." She believed him. "But people believe her," he continued, "because she looks like she tried. She says words like healing, recovery. Those are comforting. People like comfort more than truth." Evelyn sat down on the edge of his bed, careful not to disrupt the perfect geometry of his work. "She's getting traction," he said. "We need to respond." "No," Evelyn said. "You need to sleep." Leo turned toward her. He looked exhausted, but not defeated. Just worn down, not by the fight itself, but by the sheer predictability of it. "She wants to be seen as the one who saved me," he said. "She didn't even stay long enough to know what needed saving." He nodded once, slowly. "So I'm going to show them, not with words, with actions, with code." Evelyn wanted to protest, to insist he didn't need to fight back at all. But she knew better. Leo didn't fight because he wanted to win. He fought because the alternative was silence. And silence for him wasn't peaceful. It was erasure. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat in the living room, the Gazette open on her lap, rereading Melissa's interview over and over. The careful narrative, the soft redemption arc. The way the camera had caught her staring wistfully into the distance, like a woman who'd walked through hell with grace and come back whole. Evelyn had a different image in her head. The voicemail, the empty drawer, the strawberry shampoo bottle left behind. But the world didn't want that woman. The world wanted healing, even if it had to be manufactured. Leo brought it up in the middle of making grilled cheese. Not over dinner, not in a serious sit-down. Just there, while he methodically lined slices of sourdough on the panini press, flipping one slice because the butter didn't reach the edge. "I want to file," he said, like he was announcing a weather change. Evelyn looked up from the sink, dish towel in hand. "File what?" "Emancipation." She dropped the towel. It hit the floor like a dead weight, silent but loud in its finality. Leo didn't look up. He placed the cheese precisely, a triangle of sharp cheddar overlapping a square of Swiss. "I already spoke with Jared. He said he'll help." Jared was his mentor from the incubator program, the one who'd been guiding Leo through pitch meetings and legal jargon ever since the app gained traction. Jared had a mind like a scalpel and the patience of a monk, which is probably why Leo trusted him more than most adults. Evelyn bent down, picked up the towel, and said nothing for a long while. Do you know what that means? She finally asked. Yes. It's not just about paperwork. It's court. It's declaring yourself independent. It's legal adulthood. It's taxes. Leo turned, finally, and his face was calm, too calm. It's protection. From her. From all of them. He didn't mean reporters or lawyers or companies. He meant the way people were already talking about him like a brand, like an asset. I want my name to mean my choices, he said. Not hers. Not even yours. Evelyn felt the twist in her gut, hot and bitter. She didn't want to be lumped in with Melissa, but she understood the impulse. Leo wasn't running from her. He was stepping out. Does this mean you want to live on your own? She asked, forcing her voice steady. No. His answer was immediate. I want to stay here, but on my terms. I'm not leaving you. He handed her half of the sandwich, still warm, still perfect. Evelyn sat down slowly at the kitchen table. The chair creaked under her, the same chair Melissa used to sit in when she was 13, writing song lyrics in the margins of her math homework. The silence stretched. I can't stop you, she said eventually. Leo nodded. I'm not asking for permission. I'm asking for support. The next morning, they drove to Ruth's office. Evelyn's hands were trembling so badly she could barely sign the petition. Leo's, by contrast, were steady as stones. The packet included documentation of his financial understanding, proof of income, the licensing offer from the tech firm still sat in his inbox, waiting, and letters of recommendation. Jared had written one. So had Leo's occupational therapist, who had known him since he was 4. Evelyn had written one too. She wasn't required to, but she did anyway. Leo has navigated a world that was never built for him, and instead of bending to fit it, he quietly began building his own. I didn't teach him to do that. I only got out of the way. The clerk stamped the paperwork and gave them a court date. 3 weeks out. On the way home, Leo leaned his head against the window. He rarely made physical contact, but when they pulled into the driveway, he reached out, just once, and touched Evelyn's arm. Don't respond to her, he said. She's already telling everyone you're... Let her talk. Evelyn looked at him. She's manipulating everything, painting me like I'm some kind of prison warden. She thinks volume equals truth. It doesn't. Evelyn exhaled. The world doesn't care about quiet. It cares about spectacle. Leo smiled faintly. That's why I'm building something they'll listen to, not something I have to scream. That night, Evelyn stayed up late reviewing legal blogs and court precedent for minor emancipation. Most cases were grim. Teens fleeing abuse, pregnant girls trying to escape unstable homes. Leo's wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. A clean request for autonomy based not on fear, but logic. Still, it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff with her arms tied, watching him build a bridge she wasn't allowed to walk. She spent the next few days helping him assemble documents. They worked side by side at the dining room table, Evelyn sorting through printed emails and financial forms, Leo tapping away with precise keystrokes, occasionally murmuring to himself. The night before the hearing, she found him in the backyard under the old oak tree. He was lying on the grass, watching the sky shift from violet to black. You should be sleeping, she said softly. I will. He didn't look at her, just said, Did you ever feel like someone else would get credit for what you sacrificed? Evelyn blinked. Yes, all the time. Does it bother you? Only when I forget that I didn't do it for credit. Leo nodded. That's how I feel. The wind picked up slightly. Evelyn sat down beside him, knees aching as they settled into the cold grass. She didn't ask if he was ready, because he was, even if she wasn't. The courtroom smelled like lemon disinfectant and quiet desperation. Evelyn sat 2 rows behind the table where Leo now waited, dressed in the only suit he owned, grey, pressed the night before, with sleeves just a bit too short because he'd had a growth spurt 3 months ago that he refused to acknowledge. His hands were folded neatly on the desk. He didn't fidget, didn't bounce his leg. He was a statue made of thought. Melissa, across the aisle, wore navy, professional, forgiving. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun that said, respectable but soft. She clutched a tissue she hadn't used yet. The lawyer, Daniel Voss, looked freshly waxed and shark-like, with a portfolio twice the size of Leo's file. The judge was female, mid-50s, sharp eyes, no visible wedding ring. Evelyn couldn't help but hope that meant something. But she knew better than to trust optics. The bailiff called the session to order. The petition for minor emancipation began. Melissa's team spoke first. Daniel stood and began his monologue. Because that's what it was. Less an argument, more a polished narrative, delivered with the cadence of a TED Talk. Your Honor, he began, this is not a case of neglect. This is a story of a young mother who made an impossible decision during a time of undiagnosed, untreated postpartum depression, who, recognizing the impact of her actions, sought help, spent years in therapy, built a stable life, and who is now trying to reconnect with the son she once left behind, not out of convenience, but necessity. Evelyn inhaled through her nose, carefully, quietly. Daniel continued. Melissa Holloway is not here to undo the past. She's here to be a part of Leo's future, a future that includes significant financial interests, medical considerations, and educational opportunities. The question today is not whether Leo is intelligent or capable. The question is whether he should be expected to navigate adult complexities alone at 17, without the support of either of his legal guardians. He turned, hand gesturing toward Melissa, who dabbed at her eyes precisely on cue. Evelyn noted that the tissue still hadn't been used. Not really, just a prop. When it was Melissa's turn to speak, her voice was small, cracked in all the right places. She said she regretted everything, that she thought about Leo every day, that the pain of leaving him had followed her into every room she'd entered since. I've changed, she said. I've grown, and I just want a chance to help him navigate what's coming next. I'm not here to control him. I'm here to support him, to love him. Evelyn's jaw clenched so tightly it popped. When it was her turn, Evelyn kept it brief. I don't have money, or a perfect record. I have scars and kitchen calendars and 100 sleepless nights. I didn't raise Leo with a plan. I raised him because no one else stayed. He built himself, but I stayed. That's all. The judge nodded once. Then Leo stood, and the air in the room shifted. He adjusted his sleeves, took one step forward. No podium, no theatrics, just presence. My name is Leo Holloway, he began. I built a tool for people like me. It translates complex thoughts into simplified language for those who struggle with verbal communication. It's being tested right now by kids in 3 countries. He paused. No trembling, just calibration. I understand what guardianship means. I understand the value of money. I also understand manipulation and timing and how stories can be shaped to favor the loudest voice. He turned toward the judge. I don't need a guardian, he said. I need space. The courtroom fell silent. Leo didn't look at Melissa. Not once. He didn't need to. His refusal to acknowledge her presence was more effective than 1,000 accusations. I am not alone, he continued. I live with someone who understands me. Not perfectly, but patiently. I want to keep building, to keep learning, and I want the right to say no to anyone who sees my life as a second chance for theirs. He sat down. Melissa's face twitched, just slightly. The judge shuffled her papers, made a note, and for one long moment, the only sound in the room was the hum of the overhead lights. Evelyn didn't move. She didn't dare blink. This wasn't a victory speech. It was something heavier, braver. Leo hadn't defended himself by tearing anyone else down. He didn't posture. He didn't plead. He stated, cleanly, powerfully. And now all they could do was wait for the verdict. The ruling took 9 minutes, not an hour, not an afternoon. 9 minutes of quiet deliberation behind a door Evelyn couldn't see through while she sat with her hands clenched so tightly in her lap they'd gone pale. Melissa had resumed her softly trembling routine, dabbing at the corners of her eyes with a new tissue, though the mascara hadn't moved. Her lawyer kept checking his phone like a man waiting on a dinner reservation. Leo? Leo sat perfectly still, spine straight, breathing shallow but even. He didn't look nervous. He looked prepared, as if this were just another round of debugging, and all he had to do was wait for the results to compile. The judge came back with a straight face and an armful of authority. After reviewing the petition and hearing testimony from both the minor and the involved parties, she began. The court grants partial emancipation to Leo Holloway, age 17, effective immediately. Melissa's head jerked sideways like she'd been slapped. The judge continued. Leo will retain full control over all current and future intellectual property he develops, including revenue, licensing, and associated financial rights. Additionally, he will be permitted to enter legal contracts related to his work without parental consent. Physical custody will remain with his current guardian, Evelyn Holloway, until his 18th birthday, unless otherwise petitioned. Melissa opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. The judge didn't pause. This decision is made in recognition of the minor's demonstrated maturity, financial independence, and exceptional capacity to make informed decisions regarding his work and well-being. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck. Evelyn didn't breathe for 3 full seconds. Then Leo stood, calmly gathered his papers, and turned toward the door like he'd just finished a lecture, not a legal proceeding. Evelyn followed, dizzy with the adrenaline of quiet victory. Melissa remained seated, blinking as if trying to process a foreign language. Her lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously, but she didn't respond. Just sat, lips parted, watching Leo leave the courtroom without looking back. Outside, the sun hit like a spotlight. A few local reporters had gathered. Word had spread fast, probably thanks to that puff-piece interview Melissa gave. There were cameras, microphones. A woman in a pink blazer shoved a phone toward Leo with a shaky hand. Leo, can you comment on the court's decision? Are you happy? Is there anything you want to say to your supporters? He blinked, slow and deliberate, as if he were parsing every word for subtext. I don't have supporters, he said. I have a project, and I have goals. But you've become a symbol. He cut her off, not unkindly, but with precision. No, thank you, he said, stepping slightly away. I'm not a symbol. I'm a person. A few cameras flashed, One reporter whispered, "Damn," under her breath. Melissa emerged next, trying to mask her stumble behind sunglasses and a fresh tissue. She reached out, instinctively, performatively, and made the mistake of grabbing Leo's hand. His whole body tensed. He turned to face her. There was no anger on his face, just a quiet revulsion, like she'd tried to touch something she didn't own anymore. He gently pulled his hand away. "Please don't do that," he said. "But," Melissa started, "you don't get to stand next to me and pretend we walked the same road." She said nothing. "You left," he said, not loudly, not cruelly. "And then you came back for the destination." He turned back to Evelyn. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded. Couldn't quite speak yet. They walked down the courthouse steps together. Leo didn't look back. Back at home, the mailbox was stuffed with mailers. One was from a podcast wanting to interview the teen visionary behind Neuroloom. Another was from a lawyer Evelyn didn't recognize, requesting a meeting on behalf of a large philanthropic investor. Leo tossed them onto the kitchen counter without a glance. "Noise," he muttered. Evelyn finally let out a breath that had been in her chest for days. "You were incredible," she said. He didn't smile, just said, "I was prepared." Then quietly he added, "She's not done. This was just a bruise to her pride. She'll try again." Evelyn nodded. "Then we'll be ready." But something had shifted. Evelyn could feel it. The power no longer flowed in Melissa's direction. Whatever version of redemption she'd tried to buy with photo ops and tissue-soaked fiction, Leo had rejected it with composure, not cruelty. And the world, for once, had listened to the quiet voice over the loud one. Not with fanfare, but with finality. The email came at 2:11 a.m. Leo didn't have notifications enabled, too many bright pings, too much unnecessary noise. But his system was programmed to flag certain senders, and Daniel Voss had made the list. Evelyn didn't know it, but Leo had coded the flag himself, back when Melissa first reappeared. Just in case. Subject line: an opportunity to rebuild. The body of the email was even more disingenuous than Leo expected. It was written with the oily polish of someone who believed charm and legalese were interchangeable currencies. Leo. After recent events, Melissa and I wanted to extend a revised proposal, not as a custodial arrangement, but as a professional collaboration. Given your demonstrated maturity and the app's potential, Melissa is eager to support your vision and co-manage Neuroloom's future trajectory. In exchange for a modest equity share, she would provide marketing insight, access to potential networks, and help shape the platform's public narrative in a way that ensures long-term viability. We believe this could be a powerful story, mother and son, reunited by a shared mission. Let's turn the page. Let's build something together. Leo didn't reply. He highlighted the text, attached it to a new message, and forwarded it to Jared with a single-line subject. Advise as needed. No interest. Then he marked the original email as spam. Evelyn found out the next morning when she noticed him making tea, a habit he only indulged when he was deep in some decision-making process. "She's still trying to ride your name, isn't she?" she asked, not needing an answer. He nodded. "What are you thinking?" Leo sipped. "I'm thinking of publishing my own version of the story." She froze. "An interview?" "No." He tapped his fingers twice against the counter. "An announcement." By noon, the post went live across the official Neuroloom channels. Simple, unadorned, no PR firm, no soft focus portraits, just this. As of today, I am allocating 18% of all Neuroloom revenue to a fund supporting grandparents raising special needs children. Caregivers who step in when others step out should not be invisible. They should be resourced, respected, and reminded they are not alone. The attached form allowed applicants to request grants, submit stories, or nominate someone in their community. There was no logo, no press release, just quiet intent made visible. The internet did what it always does. It reacted. But this time, the reaction belonged to Leo. The story from Melissa's newspaper interview was re-examined in real time. Screenshots of the custody attempt resurfaced. The timeline was scrutinized. Even neutral voices began asking questions. If she cared so much, why'd she try to take legal control right after a financial windfall? What does maternal recovery mean when it's followed by a co-ownership pitch? This kid just bypassed every narcissistic trap with surgical grace. Melissa's public image, so carefully crafted, unraveled not with scandal but with contrast. Leo didn't slander her. He outgrew her, visibly, elegantly, irrefutably. The last text came that Friday. Evelyn was making pancakes. Leo's phone buzzed once on the counter, screen lighting up with her name. Mom. Legal. She hadn't changed the contact. That alone said everything. The message was brief. I was trying to make things right. Leo stared at it for less than a second. Then he opened his settings, scrolled, and tapped block this contact. No flourish, no hesitation, just done. He turned back to his plate. Bananas today? Evelyn blinked. You hate bananas. Not anymore. She didn't know if that was true. Maybe he still hated the texture. But maybe it wasn't about bananas. Maybe it was about choice. About reclaiming every little part of his life. One blocked number, one direct donation, one uncomfortable breakfast food at a time. She smiled and slid the plate in front of him. The text was gone. The noise was quieter. Not gone, but quieter. He wasn't angry. He was just finished. The wind had turned by the time the last of the noise faded. Autumn came early that year, sharp and clean, like the world was trying to reset itself. Evelyn stood at the kitchen window that morning, watching the wind lift the last of the summer leaves and carry them across the yard like little brittle secrets. The house was quiet, but not heavy, not anymore. Leo was already at the table, his laptop closed for once. No humming fan, no screens glowing blue into his skin, just him, cradling a mug of oolong and staring absently at the crossword puzzle in front of him. He wasn't solving it, just looking, letting the spaces between the black squares speak. Evelyn sat across from him and wrapped her hands around her own cup. It was still warm. She hadn't taken a sip yet. She didn't want to break the moment. How did you stay so calm? She asked finally. Through all of it, the hearing, the articles, her. Leo looked up slowly, then smiled faintly, not smug, not distant, just quiet, settled. She wanted control, he said, but she taught me exactly what that looks like. Evelyn blinked. And I chose the opposite. He stood, opened the cabinet, pulled out her favorite teacup, the one with the tiny chip in the handle and the faded peonies along the rim, and set it gently in front of her. He filled it from the kettle with care, the way she'd taught him. Slow pour, no splashes, leave room for breath. Let her talk, Grandma, he said. That's all she ever had. And somehow, that sentence carried more finality than the court ruling, more peace than any apology Melissa never gave. It wasn't resignation. It was choice. He wasn't giving up ground. He just refused to fight in a battle that required him to shrink. Outside, the wind lifted a small gust of leaves against the porch steps. Inside, Leo returned to his seat, unfolded the crossword again, and this time picked up a pen. Evelyn watched him for a while, his steady hand, his quiet focus, and realized something that hadn't occurred to her until now. She wasn't waiting anymore. Not for the next phone call, not for the next shoe to drop, not for Melissa to rise again with some new press strategy or faux remorseful monologue. That story had ended, not with shouting, not with triumph, but with a whisper. And the whisper didn't come from Evelyn, or even from Leo's voice. It came from his stillness, his clarity, his refusal to perform for people who hadn't earned the front row. The boy who was once terrified of loud noises had grown into a man who weaponized quiet, not as defense, but as truth. And she, well, she'd been more than the person who raised him. She'd been the audience for his becoming. He finished the last word of the puzzle, clicked his pen closed, and without looking up, said, "We should plant herbs next season. The backyard's ready." Evelyn smiled. "Yeah," she said, "it really is."